Just a smidgen. There we go. Well, cool. How's everybody doing? Mr. Colin? Yes. I love it. Well, in case you don't know, I'm a little out of breath from running backstage and back out here, so a little mo cardio. You know what I'm saying? No? Thanks, Brett. Anyway, my name is Zach. I'm the young adult pastor and the online campus pastor here at Park Valley. So if you're ever watching our stream and it messes up, it's 100% my fault, not Sammy's fault. It's just true. Although everything worked almost this week. Almost everything worked this week. So, little razzle-dazzle, but we made it happen. Another fun fact about me, I am a TikTok user. Anybody else? Just a couple? Look, some people don't like it. It's okay. I like Instagram Reels as well. I don't know. It's one of my, I guess it's a guilty pleasure. I don't know if that's even the right term. I feel like the algorithm is working for me now and not against me. So between videos you like and videos you watch and ones you skip past, eventually it starts to learn what you want in front of your face. But some of the things that I get is like finance stuff. And so today we just wanted to take some time to talk a little bit about finances and tithing and budgeting and maybe some misconceptions that fall in there as well and all that good stuff. So, I've noticed that in my TikTok swiping or whatever you call it, scrolling. Have you guys ever scrolled so long that you get the people from TikTok that are like, hey, ease up, Tiger. Take a deep breath. Maybe close the app for a little bit. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, when did that? How long have I been on this thing? But it happens. But I get all sorts of things. I get, people complaining about things. I get pastors talking about some great stuff. And some of the things I get are financial things, right? Something that I'm interested in. I enjoy it. I enjoy creating a budget, sticking to that budget. I enjoy trying to build up my family's savings and stuff like that. Those are all things that interest me, especially when it comes to a budgeting standpoint. But one thing I noticed lately is people getting mad at pastors or different church workers because of things that they have. And one guy in particular said whenever he's like scrolling through and he sees a video of a pastor, he likes to take note of what kind of shoes they're wearing because he's really big into shoes. He's like, and if those shoes cost over $300, he's like, I just want nothing to do with that church. And I'm like, I think this guy's got it like all wrong, right? Like he's confused. It's almost like he's thinking that this pastor is just taking the church credit card over to DSW and buying himself whatever pair of shoes that he wants. That's not at all how it works. And probably what's happening is that this guy has saved up through his paycheck based on the services that he is providing and buying those shoes. But sometimes, man, people are like this. Like, I used to be one of those people that would just kind of get angry at somebody because they were wealthy and really no other reason. Like, I would just be like, must be nice to own a helicopter. Like just different silly things like that, and really not taking into account the actual people that they are. Now, don't get me wrong. Money makes people weird. Now, I probably shouldn't say that money makes them weird. More so probably like their love of money makes them weird. I've seen people pass away and the siblings like rip each other apart because the person who passed away didn't leave a will. Right? And so they're on there like, no, I deserve this much money. I deserve this much money. I should get the house. Right? And I've seen people like rip themselves apart because of money and over money. My philosophy is if somebody like comes in and he's like, man, I should have all this money from this person. I'm like, dude, you can take it. Like, it's not worth the fight that we're going to go into over this. Like, you can just have it. If you think you need it that badly, just take it because you probably do. And I've also seen people who are very wealthy do a lot of really, really good things with their resources. I've seen somebody who had a ton of money that like helped someone get into rehab and paid for their entire way through that so that they could get better, right? Like, it's not necessarily money that makes you do weird stuff. It's your love of it or your view and your perception of it. But here's something that I've learned is that people who budget look rich to the people who don't budget. Right, so today we're going to walk through some maybe misunderstandings of tithing and how sometimes people have a hard time budgeting. We're going to walk through kind of what it looks like to make a basic budget. And at the end of it, I even got some resources for you that you guys can have, some templates that I use, and a challenge to give you guys as well. But before we get into it, we're going to talk about the misunderstandings of tithing. But first, I wanted to kind of tell you how Park Valley operates when it comes to tithing. So The first thing that happens is you would give, right? However much money you decide to give. That money then gets distributed into the different ministries, right? So every year we create a budget. It's kind of based loosely on last year's budget and also based on what we want to do in the future, right? So like we have a fall retreat coming up in the fall for the summit. We have a summit conference coming up. So last year I put together our budget and I worked with our finance director to think like, hey, this is how much I think it's going to cost. And based on the income that we had last year from tithing, this is how much I think we can use, and they take that money and they distribute it. That is if it's not specified. If you specify where you want your tithe to go, we have to use it the way you tell us to use it. For example, if you give to the scholarship fund for student ministry camps, which is a great place to give, it helps kids go to camp who otherwise could not afford it, right? We don't want money to be the reason that someone can't go to something. And so if you specify to that, it has to go into that fund, right? It doesn't go to young adults or anything like that. If you tithe at the Warrenton campus, that money goes to the Warrenton campus. If you tithe at the Gainesville campus, it goes to the Gainesville campus, right? And from there, like things get distributed into different areas. And that's loosely how it works. And there's a whole finance team here at Park Valley to make sure that we do things the right way, which I'm very appreciative of. Because how many times have you guys seen churches in the news because someone embezzled money or they found like a wad of cash laying around somewhere, or pastors were just using the church credit card to buy themselves whatever they needed, right? Like we are very strict here where when we use our credit card, we have to submit receipts and justify that receipt. There's no expense that is not accounted for when it comes to us. And even when we're spending large amounts of money, we then go and get the right approval from the right people to make sure that we can do this. So in no way am I taking the church credit card and just buying whatever I need to buy. Like that's just not how it works. If I want something, I save up from my paycheck, which is granted from the church because I work here based on the services that I provide, and I will save up and buy whatever it is that I need to buy. It would be silly to say that because I have nice things that I'm getting paid too much or whatever. Like you wouldn't say that the church bought my car in the same way that you wouldn't say, like, if you work at Starbucks didn't buy your food later that day. Like, that's not how it works. Like, you worked, you earned a wage, you take that wage and you use it how you see fit, right? Now, my goal is to do the best with my money that I possibly can. Part of that is because I understand that my paycheck comes from people who have donated their hard-earned money. Everything at Park Valley, like, we are a nonprofit. We don't make money on anything. When we were selling Summit t-shirts last year at the Summit Conference, those t-shirts cost $15 a pop to make. Andrew's wearing one. They cost $15 a pop to make. We sold them for $12. Right? When you go to a retreat or a summer camp, you see that big dollar sign that sometimes pops up there. That is simply you helping us put a dent in the deficit that we've created. Right? That doesn't mean that we're going into debt to take people to different places. Like, we understand that we're going to lose money doing this thing. But whenever you guys pay that price, you help us kind of recoup a little bit, put a dent in the amount of money that we spent. But, yeah, you're not going to sit here and say that, like, your job purchased this thing for you. You're going to say that you bought it with your money that you earned from your paycheck, right? Does that make sense? And so sometimes when it comes to tithing, I think people just get a little mixed up a little bit. They don't fully understand like what that money is going towards. At Park Valley, we use that money to help tell more and more people about Jesus. And I will say, without going into like details, there is always more than meets the eye, right? A lot of people will look at a big church and just be like, well, you could have been helping people instead of doing X, Y, and Z. Let me tell you, we are. We just don't brag about it a whole lot. And it's not necessarily for me to brag on, but I've seen it happen. I've seen Park Valley help people who needed help, right? I've seen us give people counseling sessions because they need counselors. That not necessarily with us. I'm not a licensed counselor in any way, shape, or form, but we've helped people get to a professional counselor because they need that help and they couldn't afford it, right? But I've also discovered some other misconceptions when it comes to tithing, and that is just in the research that I've gone through. I've seen articles where people are trying to compare how they would tithe in like the Old Testament to today, and they're like, they didn't even use money. And I'm like, they didn't really have it. It wasn't the same thing. Back in Cain and Abel's day, they didn't give God 10% of whatever money they earned because they didn't earn money, right? Like Cain gave an offering of crops and Abel gave an offering of farm animals. And forgive me if I got those mixed up. But ultimately, like, that's what they did. Like, they gave over their resources that they had. And in today's time, your resources typically tend to turn into money, right? How many people in here are a farmer? Show of hands. Luke, put your hand down. You don't live in a farm, at a farm. Right? So our resources just look different now than they did in the Old Testament times. And so for me, that argument just doesn't really make sense. And then I've also realized, like looking throughout the Bible, that it doesn't always equate to money as a whole. If you're sitting here and you're unemployed and you're like, man, how am I going to give money to the church? Let me tell you, 10% of zero is zero. But rather, what does it look like to tithe your resources? Right? Like maybe your time, maybe things that you have, maybe it's your musical abilities, maybe you have an instrument that somebody else can borrow. Like, how are you tithing your resources to help tell people about Jesus? And so I thought this would be a good time to just walk through some Bible verses on tithe and kind of what they mean. And you have to, this are 4 different Bible verses. So feel free to crack open your Bibles or your phones, or you can just jot them down however you want to do it, maybe on the sermon notes that you have or in a notes app on your phone. We even have some notebooks in the back if you want to snag one and some pens. But the first one, Mark chapter 12, verses 41 through 44, what I'm taking out of this is that it's not about the amount, right? And this is what it says. It says, Jesus sat down opposite the place where the offerings were put and watched the crowd putting their money into the temple treasury. Many rich people threw in large amounts, but a poor widow came and put in 2 very small copper coins, worth only a few cents. Calling his disciples to him, Jesus said, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put more into the treasury than all the others. They all gave out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in everything, all she had to live on." So it's not about the amount that you give. That's personally why I love that it's a percentage. It's going to look different for every single person. It's not like, to be honest, at Park Valley, we don't even, well, I wouldn't say we, the pastors especially have no clue who tithes what. Our job is not to pastor to someone based on the amount of money that they give. Our job is to pastor people because that's the right thing to do. Right? Our job is to pastor people because we want to tell them about Jesus and to share Jesus with them. I have no idea who gives what. I'm honestly not very concerned about who gives what. My job is to tell people about Jesus. The next thing is that it's not going to get you into heaven, right? We've talked about this before in other messages, but going to heaven is not a works-based thing. So if it's not a works-based thing, then the amount of money that you give doesn't correlate to you getting into heaven. It doesn't correlate to you getting something bigger and better in heaven, whatever that may be. A larger mansion. I don't know. I don't know what's going to be in there. But Luke chapter 18, verses 9 through 14 say this. To some who were confident of their own righteousness and looked down on everyone else, Jesus told this parable. 2 men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood by himself and prayed, "God, I thank you that I am not like other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even this tax collector. I fast twice a week, and I give 1/10 of all I get." But the tax collector stood at a distance. He would not even look up to heaven, but beat his breast and said, "God, have mercy on me, a sinner." I tell you that this man, rather than the other, went home justified before God. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and all those who humble themselves will be exalted. Not exhausted. I mean, you might be exhausted. I don't know. But it's not going to get you into heaven. What gets you into heaven is to believe in God, to have that relationship with Jesus, to confess that you're a sinner, and to give all of that over to God. The amount of money that you give has nothing to do with your entry to heaven. Right? The Pharisees, who were probably some of the wealthier people of the time, that and the tax collectors, right? Who did you see Jesus criticizing more in the Bible? The Pharisees, the religious elite, so to speak. The mess-ups and the screw-ups, like he loved on those people. The next thing is tithing is as old as time. Back to the Cain and Abel example, Genesis chapter 4, verse 2 to verse 4. Whenever you see a B and an A on there, it's like the second half of the verse or the first half of the verse, just in case you didn't know. But it says, now Abel kept flocks and Cain worked the soil. In the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord. And Abel also brought an offering, fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. The Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering. It's the same deal. Like Abel gave it as a sacrifice. He gave God the best that he had, where Cain did not. Right? He gave out of the abundance, kind of the leftover stuff that he had. And that ultimately resulted in Cain being all angry and stuff and taking down Abel. The next one is that God will not make you tithe, and God will bless you with what you need. So it comes from 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 6 through 8, and it says, remember this, whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly. Whoever sows generously will also reap generously. Each of you should give what you have decided in your heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver, and God is able to bless you abundantly, so that in all things, at all times, having all that you need, you will abound in every good work. Now, make no mistake. I like to make this disclaimer because I'm no TV evangelist, right? Just because you give money doesn't mean that God's going to make you filthy rich. It's not how it works. Maybe it's because I grew up in the 90s and you would see TV evangelists when you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning after leaving the TV on. It was that or like some sort of weird infomercial about dogs. But I remember seeing this one guy, and he was like, if you give $10 today, I'm going to send you this green handkerchief, and you're going to get $100 next week, right? Like, no, we're not making any kind of promises like that. The only promise that we're making is that God will take care of you. He will take care of your needs. You'll have everything that you need. And there's a big difference between a need and a want. One of the basic necessities of life is to have shelter. It's not necessarily to have a 10-bedroom house. Another necessity of life is to have food. It's not necessarily to have Chick-fil-A for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Guilty as charged. To be fair, I ate at Dunkin' Donuts this morning, so I'll probably hit Chick-fil-A later. As long as Jordan gives me a discount. But it's not saying that you are going to become filthy rich. It's saying that God is going to take care of your needs, that you're going to be taken care of, right? And so those are some verses just to talk about tithing. But the other thing I really wanted to talk about was just budgeting tips as a whole. Because like I said earlier, I think those who budget well look rich to those who don't budget. And the reason I think that is because the people who are budgeting, they're going to be saving up. They're staying disciplined. One of the best ways I can think of it is I went to go buy a shower door one time, and someone went with me, and it was between a $400 shower door or a $500 shower door. This is roughly the price you pay for a sliding shower door, right? Now, I knew how much money I had in my house fund that we had saved up. We had plenty of money to get either the $400 option or the $500 option. At this point, we're also thinking about selling our condo and everything like that. So I'm like, what's going to look better? I'd rather get what's going to look better when we go to sell it than something that will just make do. So I opted for the $500 shower door. But the person who was with me is like, man, that's a big difference. And I'm sitting here, I'm like, yes, but we have saved over time. Like, we're not putting ourselves in financial jeopardy over the shower door, because I know how much money is allocated into our house fund, and we're okay. We can buy this door. But to that person with me, they didn't see all the hard work. They didn't see the Excel spreadsheets. They didn't see the discipline that it took. They didn't see us deciding not to eat out or not go on the vacation to afford this stuff. All they saw was the moment that I dropped $500 on a shower door. That's all they saw. And so a lot of times the same thing can happen to us, right? Like, we're hanging out with that friend and they just drop the money to buy the latest, greatest Xbox or the newest iPhone or whatever it is, and you're like, man, that dude's loaded. But maybe what we don't know is maybe they're in debt up to their eyeballs, number one, or number two, maybe they've just budgeted well, right? It's okay. It's okay to budget well, to set money aside for things that you want. It's okay to do that, as long as also you're setting things aside for things that you need as well, like gas, basic food, things like that. So creating a budget and sticking to it is going to be the best way for you to reach your financial goals. Be weary of the get-rich-quick schemes. One thing I've noticed on TikTok is someone will come in and be like, you can make $10,000 a week starting today. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, yo, I'm in. 10 grand a week? Let's do it. And they'll be like, all you got to do is go to Canva and you can get a free Canva account. And then you upload this design onto a t-shirt and then you take that t-shirt and you go over to the Amazon store and then you create this Amazon account for free. And then you upload that t-shirt design onto the Amazon account and then people just buy that t-shirt and you start racking in the dough. And I'm like, what? Who are these people? And then you kind of come back and be like, I don't really know who the people are. So they kind of hit you with this hypothetical situation. So from a hypothetical standpoint, you very well could make 10 grand a week selling one t-shirt on Amazon, right? However, what is the likelihood that that many people are going to find and like and buy that shirt? I don't know about you guys. My wife sent me a relatively nice shirt from Old Navy. I looked at it and I was like, I don't love it. And it's $24. And she's like, but it's on sale. I'm like, it's $24 for a shirt. I don't know about you. I come from the day I try to get free t-shirts everywhere I go, right? I go to summer camps, you get at least one. If you go to both, you can get two. All sorts of great things. You volunteer at the summit, I might just hit you in the face with a summit t-shirt. Who knows? Who knows? Right? So for me, like that price point was not worth it for that shirt. So to say that you can make 10 grand a week doing this simple task is not technically untrue. It's just very, very unrealistic, right? So be wary of these get-rich-quick schemes. And normally what I've found in those videos is they don't actually do that thing themselves, and they point you to purchase a course where they're going to explain to you how to do it, right? Those are all red flags to me. If you're trying to get me to buy a course to show me how to do something, chances are you're probably not making 10 grand a week, right? So be wary of get-rich-quick schemes. And then I've also heard Dave Ramsey say this line. He's like, if you're trying to use the lottery to build wealth, just take a look at who is in the lottery line. It's not like millionaires or billionaires, right? You're not going to see Josh Harris, who bought the Washington Commanders for $6 billion. He's probably not playing the lottery. You know, like just take a look. So if that's who's in the lottery line, maybe that's not a good way to build wealth. Maybe that's not a good way to budget, is to always be taking chances. Now, I have a little bit of a template for you guys. Lauren, if you go to the next slide. Nailed it. This is the skeleton of budgeting, right? It's very broad, so I don't know if you can all see it. There it is. But it's basically saying 50% of your income is going to go towards savings. 40% is going to be there for you to spend. And 10% is going to be there for you to give. Personally, me and my wife, we give to Park Valley. There's a few reasons outside of my employment as to why I do that. I don't think there's actually a requirement for me to tithe. I don't know. I just do it. But I knew that my money is going to be protected at Park Valley. It's going to be used well at Park Valley, and it's going to be used to tell more and more people about Jesus. So that's why we give to Park Valley. But within this, you might be like a little alarmed at first and be like, how in the world am I going to save 50% of my paycheck when I make $2 a week as a waitress, right? All it's saying is, like for me, what I fall into the savings category is like, my mortgage payment will fall into that category. My house fund will fall into that category, which is used for repairs or purchases or anything like that. Like it's being stored away for a rainy day. It's not saying I'm never, ever, 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 ever going to spend that money. It's saying that like, man, if my hot water heater goes out, I've already tucked this money away for it. Or maybe we get enough money and we want to put a deck onto our house, and now we can do that and not have to finance it and pay 10 to 20% interest more than what the deck would have originally cost, right? Like, so you're tucking that money away for something else. You can do the same thing for car repairs. What I tend to like to do is I round everything up to the nearest whole dollar. So if I have a payment that's like $20.50, I put $21 away, and it'll slowly and slowly and slowly build over time. The next thing is spending. That's 40% of your stuff. Like, I have a fund money account that is separate from my mortgage account, that is separate from like whatever account that's out there, gas and grocery, anything like that. And so if I'm going to go out to eat, I check that fund money account and be like, yeah, I can afford to go out to eat. And then you're not sitting there drowning your sorrows in chicken nuggets because you're like, I'm not sure how I'm going to drive home. I didn't save any money for gas, right? Like, no, these are two separate accounts that you're thinking of. And then 10% is giving. Now, while I highly recommend Park Valley just because I know what we do, I have a little bit of the inside scoop, I would say give 10% to wherever you see fit, right? Give it to something that you believe in, that you want to see become better, right? And so that is the basic skeleton of how you're going to budget. But let me tell you, the key is discipline. If you create a budget and you don't actually stick to it, there is no point in creating that budget in the first place. Discipline is the key to creating that budget. And one of the things that me and my wife budget for, we have an account called our tithe account. And so 10% of our money goes out of the account, and then I send it right back out, right? The other account that we have is called the personal tithe account. It might be kind of a weird name. It's not money that I use for myself. It's money that we use for other people specifically, right? So whenever, I'm sure you guys have had this happen before, maybe you're pumping gas at a gas station, someone comes up to you and is like, hey man, you think you can come like top my tank off real quick? I just look at my personal tithe account, and I've done it before. A few of my rules is I'm going to walk over and top your tank off myself. You know, like I put my card in, I pull it out, I put it in your car, and then I end it and I close out the sale, right? Like I make the whole thing happen, but I'm not putting myself in financial jeopardy to help somebody else. That's something that we have planned for, to go out and to help people. We set some money aside. So if somebody's like wants a meal, I can get them a meal. If a big life event happens that's maybe in a negative way, we can help support that person. Maybe it's financially, maybe it's by providing meals or whatever it is. Like we have set money aside to do that specifically, right? That can come straight out of our wallets. But here are some good takeaways. Number one, we're called to tithe and to give 10% of our money back to God. It's up to you guys to see how you see that to be done. Like I said, I recommend Park Valley, but I'm not going to tell you to tithe to Park Valley. Me and Catherine personally do that. And then when you're disciplined with a budget, I think you'll find more financial freedom than when you're not. And when I was writing this, I kind of thought to myself, it's almost like our relationship with Jesus, right? Like when you're outside of a relationship with Jesus, you think you're free and everything like that, but it's like life keeps hitting you over and over and over again. But when you are disciplined and inside of that relationship with Jesus, you have more freedom. You might not think so at first, but you do. It's the same thing when it comes to budgeting. When you stick to a budget and you are disciplined with it, you will have more financial freedom. It is so much more relaxing to plan and budget for a vacation and just go chill and enjoy on the beach in the sunshine than it is to do it on a whim and not quite be confident how you're going to make that payment. You know, or maybe you're sitting on the beach like you were able to get the hotel room to get to the beach, but am I going to be able to afford rent next month because of this trip? Like it's so much more relaxing to plan and budget and then to be able to go out and do those things and know that you're still good because it is a completely separate category from your mortgage or your rent or whatever it looks like for you guys. So here are a couple action steps that you guys can take. Number one is our 90-day tithing challenge. You can scan this QR code. Park Valley has this 90-day tithing challenge where if you tithe 10% of your income over the course of 90 days, so whatever your payments look like, everybody's a little bit different. I get paid on the 1st and the 15th. I'm sure some of you guys get paid every other week or whatever it looks like. If you don't feel like God is moving in that 90 days, we will give you your money back. And I think only one person has requested their money back in the time that we've done this, which is from like the inception of Park Valley, and we gave them their money back. So, but I will say, to do the 90-day tithing challenge, you do have to scan this QR code and actually register, right? If you just tithe randomly and don't go through the 90-day tithing challenge, then it doesn't really count, right? So if you want to do that challenge and potentially get your money back, you know, maybe you're a little afraid, make sure you go through that QR code. You can also find it on our website under giving. It's all the way at the bottom, but I thought a QR code to send you right to the registration link might be a little bit easier. The other thing is budgeting templates. These are templates that I've created that I use myself. Once again, you can scan that QR code. It'll take you to a Dropbox link where you can download the Excel sheet. It has all the equations put in there already for you guys. And it's broken up with how I get paid, right? So the 1st and the 15th, you'll see like February 1st, February 15th, you would input your income, or you can even change that up a little bit based on how you get paid. Maybe it's like payment 1, 2, or 3, depending on how you get paid that month. You put in how much you get. It'll calculate that total for the month, and then you go in and you list out your expenses, and then you put how much each thing costs, right? And the way I do it is on the 15th of every month, the first half of all of my monthly expenses get taken out of my paycheck and into those separate accounts. And then on the first, the second half gets taken out, put in those accounts, and then payments start getting made, like mortgage, Netflix, whatever it is, right? And so I basically divide it by 2. So Spotify costs, is it $12 now? $10? $12? I don't remember. 11? Well, we'll say 12 because it's easier to divide. So I would put $6 under the first and $6 under the 15th. That'll total it out to $12. And then that will also count it against your income, and it'll total everything at the bottom right-hand corner of that month, showing you how much you have left over or how much you have spent over, right? And so I also use this template to calculate life changes. Before we bought our house, I copy and pasted this template into another section of my Google Sheet, is my preferred method, and I ran scenarios based on their estimated payments for my mortgage, right? I would type that in and then see how everything fit financially. It was like, okay, well, if we deduct a little bit from here, then it can go into this and stuff like that. But let me tell you, if you budget and you are disciplined with it and you track it, you're going to feel so much more financially free. I think you're going to hit your financial goals better. If you're sitting here and you're like, I don't really have financial goals, think about what you want to do that costs money, right? Do you want to move out of your parents' house? Maybe you're already out of your parents' house. Do you want to buy a house? You know, are you in that house? Is there a repair that you want to make? Like, what are some financial goals that you want to accomplish? And when you're creating that budget, think of those financial goals, right? And then another thing that I do that I find super, super beneficial is I go through a certain bank. If you want to know that bank, come ask me afterwards. It's not top secret. I just feel weird saying it from a stage on a microphone. I don't know. But I found out that my bank will let me create as many checking accounts as I want for free. And so when I get paid, my money hits my main checking account. And then they also do a thing called auto transfers, where I can schedule a transfer on the 1st and 15th of every month. So it hits my main account, and on the 1st and the 15th, it distributes X amount of dollars to all of the accounts that I have assigned it to, right? So all I do is go in on those days and double check to make sure that everything worked the way it's supposed to work, right? And then if I can, I'll do like an e-check for my mortgage payment on automatic withdrawals, and then I'm just tracking that and making sure that that check gets paid, right? I also have an account that's called Kiter Payable. And basically, that's the account that we use to pay people. If like a plumber comes to our house and I'm cutting a check, so I only have checks to one checking account. And if a plumber comes, let's say his services cost $80 to fix whatever leaky pipe, I would write a check for $80, hand it to him, open up my bank app, transfer $80 from my house fund to Kiter Payable, and wait for that check to clear, right? It makes it very simple. And if your brain works anything like mine, before I did this, when I just saw the giant lump sum of money, I would be like, yeah, we good. And then all of a sudden I'd be like, oh, no, we weren't. We weren't good. So dividing everything up like this, it just helps my brain think and see things a lot easier, so I'm not constantly overspending, right? I can just look into the account that I have for whatever subject it is, and I either have enough or I don't have enough. But through getting disciplined, that means sometimes when your friends ask you to eat out, you're probably going to say no. Sometimes when people want you to take this big vacation, maybe you don't take it yet. Maybe you go the next year or whatever it is. Or if you really, really want to do it, you shift your finances around to make that happen. So when you're on that vacation, you're not freaking out about like how am I going to make this payment when I get home? You know, like you have everything accounted for when you're there. So that's all of my stuff about tithing and budgeting. I hope I didn't bore you too much. But let me pray for us, and then we got some announcements that we'll dive into. So, Father, thank you for today and just the opportunity we have to be here and to do this and to just talk about money and what it looks like to tithe and maybe some misunderstandings and, man, how to even use our money to the best of its ability, God, and that we can use that to glorify you as well, whatever our financial state is. But, yeah, God, man, I just pray for every single person here that they can get disciplined and reach those financial goals with however you see fit, whatever timeline that you put in place for them, Father. And I also just pray for the rest of the night that wherever they're going after this, God, that they just stay safe and they get there safely. And, yeah, I pray for all this in your name. Amen.